Doamnelor și domnilor, bună ziua! Emisiunea Observatori la Parlamentul European îl are ca invitat astăzi pe deputatul Michael Gahler. Deputatul german este membru al Uniunii Creștin-Democrate CDU. Din 1999 este prezent pe listele eurodeputaților germani. Până atunci a ocupat diverse funcții în administrația locală și regională. Mr. Gahler, you hold a law degree and you are a lawyer. Why did you decide to get into politics?
Well, indeed, I studied law with a second state exam at the end in order to have many options afterwards. And I never practiced law. Actually, just after my second state exam, I joined the Foreign Office and was in the diplomatic school for a year. But I had been active before from the youth in my party youth organization, always dealing with external issues already. And I studied some 8 months in Dijon, and also during the time between the two state exams, I've been for 6 months in Brussels at our German permanent representation. And from there I said, okay, now I go to the Foreign Office. And then my party youth at the time said then for the 94 elections, well, you are in the Foreign Office. I was working for a while also on international youth level, in European level, and then they said it's good to have as a candidate. And then it worked out only in 99. So that is why I'm here.
So you have a long career.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here in Brussels.
Yeah, it's now the 5th term, roughly.
Well. A survivor.
Well, no? Survivor. I'm re-elected, so I didn't survive. I'm
yes.
re-elected, so.
So that means more powerful.
Well, I mean, we have a relatively high change of colleagues, so more than 50% are new. But tendentially, the Germans are more stable, and that gives us more experience, more, so to say, collective memory, which brings us occasionally in positions where the shortcomers wouldn't automatically end in.
You are a member of the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs. You recently had an intervention about the European Defence Fund. At what stage is the project for the creation of the European Army?
Well, Defence Fund and Army, I wouldn't get that into one phrase. The Defence Fund is about opening the European budget for the first time, also by having activated one chapter of the treaty, which is technocratically called Permanent Structured Cooperation. Thereby we are opening the EU budget for projects, for common projects in the area of security and defence. That is not about creating a European army, but we call it rather, we are establishing a defence union, which means that through this chapter of the treaty, we are enabled to do far more together in the phase of planning, in the area of procurement, in the area of common projects also for our industry, because apart from the assessment, a common assessment of the security situation, we want to strengthen our industries in this area in order not to be dependent, even not to be dependent too much on friends, but to have an own industrial base to provide for what we need, and where we can, through cooperation, be more efficient in the spending.
Germany has recently announced that we'll buy European planes. Is this a political and economic signal? Well, generally speaking?
Yeah, I would say we've had the signature recently of Germany, France and Spain on the planning, and it's open to further members for the planning of new fighter aircraft, European.
The 5th generation.
Yeah. I think what we need is a base of our own and interoperability by having materials where we are able then to cooperate better. But also to be more disciplined. What we have seen in the past is we named a common helicopter, gave it a certain name, and then we found out we have up to 26 different versions of it. I mean, I mean, we have afforded that because there are too many thinkers in the planning authorities and of all of our member states who still think in the old way. We've always done it this way and we continue this way. And we have always needed this and in future we will need that as well. I think when we really assess the security situation, we will find out first the threats and challenges are the same for all of us. And when there is the need to be somewhere in our neighborhood militarily, we will be there together in the same area. So that means we need to prepare together, and at best we have the same materials in order to be able really to optimize the ability to act together. And insofar, I think thinking needs to change, especially in these planning authorities. What I have noticed over the years, there is, especially in this area, there is quite a political will. And on the ministerial level, yes, the ministers agree mutually to do more together. But the administration is resistant. So it reminds me of this British series, Yes Minister.
Yes.
Where the minister says something and the state secretary says, yes, minister, and just does the opposite. And I think that is one of the problems in many member states of this military hierarchy and administration, that they are, so to say, they think, oh, we've always been here and as a minister perhaps for a while, I don't care so much. So we must implement also, and with common European projects, we must oblige our administrations that the political will that is expressed by the ministers and by the parliament here, when it's about money that we spend from our budget, that the political will is really implemented.
What is the position of the European Parliament regarding the future of the intermediate range nuclear forces? You also had a recent intervention on this topic.
Yeah, I think there is very clearly a common position which is shared by almost everybody, because these intermediate nuclear missiles that were banned through the INF Treaty in 1987, they were the ones that were threatening us in Europe. They were not threatening the then Soviet Union and the United States. But in theory, at least, had we not at the time responded to this unilateral Soviet step of the SS-20 missiles, we would have been exposed to them, but the Americans wouldn't have been exposed to the same threat. And I have a very high interest, and I think we should politically see that we all have the same level of security, be it from a NATO perspective, so including our American allies, transatlantic Canadians and Americans, but also inside Europe. So for me, regardless, I mean, we have a huge cohesion between NATO and EU membership, but not all. And I do not want to have any EU members who are not in NATO, that they are worse off when it comes to security. And so I think regardless whether we are in NATO or not, we assess that the end of the INF Treaty, and I'm afraid it's not only Mr. Trump, but also the Russians, they started developing new missiles and thought that we wouldn't know about that, but we did. It was already Mr. Obama who was the first to speak about it, and the Russians are trying, in my mind, to assess the situation politically in Europe, saying, well, the situation is different than 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when the NATO missile decision was taken to counter the Soviet threat at the time. And this time the Russians might think these Westerners are not politically able to implement it. So our interest clearly would have been to continue it. I'm afraid it will fade away when the 6 months after the stepping out are over. And we have to think of how to replace it and or to think of something else. But we are not the partners of the treaty. We are not the US, we are not Russia. But we are affected. So I think it is high time for us to contact all relevant stakeholders and tell them, hey, we have an interest not to lower our security level. And for that, I think we must be very creative and also perhaps involve other countries, such as China or India or others who are relatively big powers, who have their interest, but perhaps it would also be good that also between Russia and China or Russia and India there wouldn't be intermediate missiles. So we should get people interested at the first stage to discuss the issue and to make it a problematic issue as well. And comes after the INF comes the START talks. So the START treaty will also expire in 2021, which limits the strategic nuclear arsenal of Russia and the United States.
Perhaps in this equation must be included, I'm sure will be included also China in strategic.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I would wish that in this regard we will, as before, also speak as Europeans with one voice, because I don't think that anybody can escape and make an extra deal, a separate deal, either with friends or with potential adversaries.
What can you tell us about the European strategic communication to counteract third-party propaganda?
I think it is, first of all, important to raise awareness. I recall very much when it all started, and it started with the aggression against Ukraine, with Crimea and so on, when Putin for a while was really in a position to distract from the Russian actions and pretending as if that were whoever, green men from somewhere. And there were even serious media and the general public who for a while believed what he was telling us. Now we all know that was fake news, that we all know that there was a deliberate strategy to disinform our society, and at the end I would say even to argue that, well, there is no truth, there is no lies, everybody has his own truth. And I think it's our task to make it very clear that there is truth and there are fake news. And to achieve that, among others, not only, but among others with such a working unit, is not to make a counter-propaganda, no, but to simply tell the truth. That is what, against fake news, against propaganda, we should not make counter-propaganda, but simply tell things as they are. And to develop a certain degree of, as a modern word, resilience in our societies, but also amongst well-informed journalists, because I think that is the best tool to counter lies and fake news, is simply a press and a media environment that is professional and that abides by its own ethics and that tells what the truth is all about. And insofar, we as a parliament have always argued and supported the upgrade of this East Stratcom working unit. We have always demanded more money and more staff to be used for it, because the input that Russia and probably others as well, that they are using, the money amount that they are using to spread false information is huge. And we are relatively poor, in inverted commas, in our responses, although those who are doing the job are really doing a very good professional job.
You are a member of the Commission for Foreign Relations of the European Parliament. From that position, what is the current phase in the relations between the European Union and the United States?
Well, I think from our side, we would like to have the best of possible relations, of course. We have a huge interest to retain the US as our transatlantic ally, to have them physically in Europe, to have them and keep them interested in Europe. And also when it's not about security and defense issues, especially in the trade field, that we do the utmost and upgrade our trade relations. We have 700 billion euros per year EU-US trade. That is almost 2 billion a day. And I think we should rather facilitate remaining build and remove remaining obstacles, be it the customs tariffs that exist or certain certifications where one wonders what is the added value thereof. But we should definitely not think in terms like, unfortunately, the current president thinks, that he strengthens the US and creates jobs in the US when he imposes extra tariffs. I think this is a non-starter. It is nothing that adds to jobs, neither in America in the medium term nor in Europe, of course. And we have been successful, I would say, in a common stance towards the US. I recall it's not even a year ago when our Commission President Juncker visited Mr. Trump and told him, hey, President, if you engage in nonsense, we can also reply in a nonsense way. And nonsense would be to mutually step up barriers. And the US at the time and recently, they, well, at least towards us, they agreed to have not to pursue further this thought towards us. But we are affected, of course, by the trade war between China and the US. And in this regard, I think we have all interest to tell, hey, we got the Chinese in the WTO, the World Trade Organization, for the very purpose that they abide by the standards. And that means we have common interest with the US towards China to argue, let us, when you are active, you Chinese, in the US and in Europe, buying industries, buying technology, fair enough, fine. But we must be able to do it in the same way in China. When we invest in China, we should not be obliged to have to partner with joint ventures with Chinese majority, 51%. We do not want extra customs or customs rates that we don't apply to your products. And we do not want to be obliged to transfer technology knowledge when we go there, because we don't oblige the Chinese when they come to us as well. So it is about common interest towards third countries. But what I think what we should do, we should see that the common interest of the US and Europe, who are two major democratic areas in the world, wealthy ones, democratic ones, stable ones, we should try and have a TTIP, this trade agreement, as we had planned, which was sacked for the meanwhile. We should come to there and thereby build the largest bloc with common rules and thereby definitely set the world and global standards for goods, for standards in environment, for labor standards, because otherwise, when we don't get our acts together, it will be with the Chinese.
You are involved in the process of Ukraine-European Union association. When do you estimate it will be possible to see Ukraine associated and integrated in European Union?
Well, everything should happen step by step. We should not, at this stage, I would say, open perspectives where the country is clearly long away from. We have the general rule is Article 49 of the treaty, which says that any European country can apply for membership when they want to obey the rules, to put it briefly. And I would add, and when the European Union is able to integrate further members. So that is the very general thing. Now, when it comes to the reality on the ground, we see that, of course, Ukraine of today could not join the European Union. So prior to answering or offering perspectives that are not yet realistic, or where we cannot yet open a time framework that is realistic, I think we should work, and that is what especially the people of Ukraine expect from us, to support them in their wish and in their demand towards their executives to really implement what is about to be implemented, not only with regard to the Constitution, but what we have agreed. And what our comprehensive treaty, Free Trade and Association Treaty, that is 80% is already the so-called acquis communautaire, that is the legal body of the European Union. So what we can have to see is now that Ukraine, in its legislation and its daily politics that they pursue, I'm leaving out now the war, but apart from that, that they should not go a path that gets them legally further away from us, so that they should double check, and we help them in this regard, every legislation, whether it is compatible with EU legislation. We are giving Ukraine the most money outside the EU. So, and it's the third country that gets most financial support from us and most administrative support. And all these steps, all taken together, what I'm telling the Ukrainians, when they are talking, asking the same question as you do, I say, you know, you are the one who wants to come in. So you are in a way the bride that needs to make herself attractive towards us. And I would like a democratic, a prosperous, a non-corrupt Ukraine where the rule of law is applied, so attractive at some point that we say from our side, hey, we must have them. They are more than 40 million. They have well-trained people. They are functioning well. This is not only a market, but it is a stabilizing factor in the east of Europe. And it's a need for us. It's in our interest and in their interest to have them. But I want to prepare them so well that at some point we come there. And we should not, because we have seen that. Perhaps a bit, I recall, I was already here when it was about Romania and Bulgaria. This question, shall you come in 2007 or in 2008? And there was, for one of the countries, honestly, I don't recall which it was a bit easier. And we saw that the other country, which was a bit more difficult to get okay, that they made an effort, and the one for which it was more easier to get in, they leaned a bit back. So in my mind, in order to also to get the acceptance amongst existing EU member states' populations to think of such a huge enlargement as a country like EU, as Ukraine would be, they should do the homework first. We are supportive, but I'm not in the position to tell them, now we make you a candidate and the date of entry is 2000 and something.
Romania is not a member of the Schengen area yet. Why?
For purely political reasons, not for technical reasons. I support that we accept you in Schengen, like the same with Bulgaria, because according to all our experts, you have fulfilled the criteria. And the only remaining argument is, apparently, from some countries, well, yes, they have on the paper agreed everything and also the technicalities are all in place, but the corruption, perhaps on the border with Serbia or so, there we cannot see that we can avoid things. I think this is a very unfair argument because you can use it also for other countries who have an external border, where I would not also say 100% that there is no civil servant who might take a bribe, in any country who has an external crossing point. So my political and legal argument is they have fulfilled the criteria that have been put up, so they have to be accepted. And I'm in favor of this approach. And all those who are currently still doing otherwise, they are not serving the purpose that a country undertakes efforts and fulfills the criteria, and then we say, oh no, it was just a joke. No, that's not fair.
A question about the Republic of Moldova. How do you appreciate the situation in the Republic of Moldova after the latest events? We have seen a rare understanding between the European Union, the United States and Russia.
Yes. I've been visiting Moldova several times. I have followed the events there. I'm from the EPP, so we have our friends is Maia Sandu and Andrei Nastase, among others. And we have seen it over the years, how a party, the party of Mr. Plahotniuk, dressed itself up as being very European, waving the European flag and saying, look at Mr. Dodon, the socialist there with Moscow. And, but they were by no means behaving in a European way. He has established a system of cronies and of corrupted structures. He has conquered the state institutions. I mean, we have seen the parliament elected, the legitimate parliament elected a legitimate government, and there was a stalemate. The civil servants watched, well, is that our new government, or is Plahotniuk staging a coup, or what is he doing? And that shows how, to what an extent he has conquered the state. And had the Americans, I think, at the end not been very clear about that, he wouldn't have left with his entourage the country. I mean, there was this one night where a lot of private planes left from Chisinau airport and took away the most evil structures. I think also the Russians have understood in this area at this moment it's not about geopolitics, but it's about really removing a structure in the country where all state institutions have been paralyzed, and it is also even in their interest to have a situation where the country is calculable. I mean, the Russians have their Transnistria people, and they think they can influence the situation sufficiently. I support very much the pro-European stance of Maia Sandu and her government. We should, as EU, now resume our payments, our macro-financial support, which was halted because of the unacceptable behavior of Mr. Plahotniuk. I met him once personally and told him into his face, stop that, that's not the way. You cannot wave a European flag and behave in this way. I hope that the institutions now and all these civil servants there who have perhaps been bribed and been tempted not to follow the rule of law, but to follow the orders of this oligarch, I would very much hope that there is now a perspective for becoming, for stabilizing and for having a perspective for democratization, stabilization and prosperity. We are prepared to support it. I mean, your country, Romania, is the closest one. Most of the citizens also have your passport. But I would say we have given them already 2 years ago the visa freedom in order to make their own passport a first-class passport. I would wish you that the situation is stabilized there so that the Moldovans don't have to use their Romanian passport to flee the country because they don't have any hope. Many have lost the hope. Many are abroad. And many were prevented from voting recently also. No, that was in Romania, in the embassies. But in Moldova, I heard about that as well. So I mixed it just up. Why? No. No, I think those who are abroad from Moldova, they very warmly welcome the development now.
Mr. Gahler, only one question. What is the stage of the negotiations for the position of President of the European Commission?
Shall we as a parliament accept that there is a rollback initiated by the French president to reduce the scope of parliamentarism and democratization? We are often criticized there is a lack of democracy on the European level. We are working to overcome it. We have established, first, the Lisbon Treaty is already a treaty that has a different wording than the predecessor. Now it says the European Council with a qualified majority has to consider the result of the election and propose somebody, and the Parliament elects. Now the best way is for the European Council to listen to the Parliament, which noises come from the Parliament, because then they avoid getting a bloody nose proposing somebody who wouldn't get a majority. So my impression is currently that there is in abstract terms, many parties here say, we accept the principle of Spitzenkandidat, of a top candidate. But then some of them then say, but that applies only to our candidate. Now that's not the way we can work. As none of us has a majority, I think we have to have a package deal both on substance and on personnel. And this message, and hopefully we'll get one by the end of the week, by having discussions in the groups. I think the socialist and the liberal leader of the group have damaged the standing of the parliament by ruling out voting for Mr. Weber. I think that was even tactically not a good step, because it gets the council in a stronger position, and especially the wish of Monsieur Macron not to accept the vote of the people. We have had more than 200 million people in Europe voting. More than 200 voters said, we want this parliament, and we want the treaty to be applied that the parliament votes for a commission president. And for what sake did we set up the Spitzenkandidaten, that the people, like on national level, before an election, they know who will be the executive head after the election if the majority is there. I think that is a very normal democratization process that we have, and accordingly we should also act and assume our responsibility and not accept the ruling from home capitals into the political groups. Our political group is not ruled by Berlin or any other capital, but currently it's my impression that the Liberals are ruled from Paris, and that also Mr. Sanchez, in an alliance with Monsieur Macron, is trying to dominate through the Spanish group leader of the socialist decision making. But what they said to Mr. Weber in last week, that they wouldn't vote for him, that was not before discussed in their own political groups. And I think first we need to discuss the principle of Spitzenkandidat, and I support it. Then we have to discuss about the substance, and there are 4 political groups discussing issues where we want to head for. And then comes the personality, and I state the following. There is no majority to the left of the EPP for any candidate further left. Further right of the EPP, we do not want this majority. So any center majority will have to include the EPP, and that means it includes Manfred Weber. That is where I see the situation, and hopefully we are not dragged over the table from the council when he tries to impose somebody. I'm confident all heads of government of the EPP stand by Manfred Weber, and perhaps others as well, that we will have at least a blocking minority to decide somebody else than a Spitzenkandidat to be suggested to the parliament. And if the council did dare to propose somebody like that, I'm quite confident that over all parties, or many parties, we will refuse this candidate that is not a Spitzenkandidat. So best chances in relative terms still for Manfred Weber is if the parliament is able and willing to pursue its own course further, democratization and parliamentarization of the political process on the European level.
Mr. Gahler, thank you very much.
Mulțumesc.